have joined but not yet turned on their videos. We'd love to see your faces if that works for you. And if it doesn't, that's fine too. Okay, let's screen share the bracha over Torah study. Okay, everybody in cacophony. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam
asher
neshanu v'tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah.
Amen.
Not big as my throat. So.
Amen. Welcome again. Shabbat Shalom again. And we've got a juicy parsha, of course, Va'era. And it's also MLK Shabbat. So I brought in a little bit of MLK and the parsha itself, some Zoharic notions, and off we go. Ready? All right, I'm going to assume we're ready. I have been signed out because you are currently on another device. Is that bad? Does anyone know? Should I take that as bad or no? It looks okay, right? It's okay. It's okay. Okay.
You sound fine and everything's going well, so let's not hit any buttons.
Okay. Okay. Here we go. Oh, that's not the right one. Hold on. Here we go. Full screen, entire screen. Okay, how does that look? Okay? Okay, so there's this concept in Kabbalah called dibur b'galut, that speech itself is an exile. And I've talked a little bit about this in the past, but I thought it was appropriate at this moment. I was inspired, and we'll get to it below, by a piece my chavruta wrote, Rabbi Sharon Kuhn-Annisfeld, about the nature of speech in this moment, right? And the absence of silence and how we're filling, right, screens and, all kinds of social media with a kind of speech that doesn't feel like communication. So I wanted to explore that and explore that concept itself in Exodus. So by way of introduction, we have this. So I will tell you that the text from the Zohar I am not including in the original because it's a very complicated Aramaic that I cannot parse. So full disclosure. So the concept of galut ha-dibur, the broken condition of language, or speech in exile. When the community Israel was exiled from its home, the letters of the divine name became, if one may say so, separated. The Hey flying apart from the Vav. So we're talking about God's name, Yud Hey Vav Hey. And the letters are, when Israel was in slavery, was in Egypt, in exile there, the letters of God's name were literally in the minds of the mystics, separated from one another. We can thus understand the sentence, I was dumb with silence, in Psalms 39:3, as though, or as through, the separation of the Vav from the Hey. There was no voice, and thus utterance was silence. So let's think for a moment about the Exodus story, right? The people are groaning and moaning. But there's no language there. We have a prophet who cannot speak. We have a Pharaoh who does not listen. So the whole system of communication is, as it were, broken, right? There's no connection. And in the minds of the Kabbalists, where does that connection happen? It happens at Sinai, when God's voice is revealed and actually heard. So revelation is not enough by itself. There needs to be that connection, right? Spoken and heard. Okay, so then I went to, and these two texts are sort of introductory. So MLK had this trope that he actually mentioned in a number of speeches called the language of the unheard, and riots as a language of the unheard. So as far as I understand, for the most part, he was not at all behind violence, and yet wanted Americans to understand that riots were a means of communication, and that there needed to be something heard there. So let's read his words directly. Anyone in the room would like to read these words?
I can jump in.
Great, Alex, thank you.
Yeah.
Can you pass David the speaker to Alex? Thank you so much.
All right. From The Other America, April 1967.
Correct. Thank you.
Let me say, as I've always said, and I will always continue to say, that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. I am still convinced that nonviolence is the most potent weapon available to oppress people in their struggle for freedom and justice. I feel that violence will only create more social problems than they will solve, that in a real sense it is impractical for the Negro to even think of mounting a violent revolution in the United States. So I will continue to condemn riots and continue to say to my brothers and sisters that this is not the way, and continue to affirm that there is another way. But at the same time, it is as necessary for me to be as vigorous in condemning the conditions which cause persons to feel that they must engage in riotous activities as it is for me to condemn riots. I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? It's failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these reoccurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention.
Thank you so much, Alex. Oh, it's so funny. It's ironic. He goes on to talk about the need for housing and jobs and very specific, proposals for ways to raise up the social conditions of Black people in America, as well as very specific justice proposals. So he's walking a complicated line here, right? Like understanding, like inviting us to hear what is being communicated through wordlessness, right? But violent wordlessness, and yet not in any way condoning it. So it is complicated, and I think not an easy invitation to kind of meet. Okay, so with those two things in mind, the language of the unheard and the sense of silence during galut, during exile and slavery, we now turn to the Torah. And we'll look first to last week's Torah and look at Pharaoh not listening. So it says in Exodus 5, Achar ba'u Moshe va'Aaron v'yamru el Paro, Ko amar Adonai Elohei Yisrael, Shalach et ami v'yachogu li b'midbar. So afterwards, Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, "Thus says Adonai, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may celebrate a festival for me in the wilderness." Vayomer Paro, mi Adonai asher ishma b'kolo. But Pharaoh said, "Who is Adonai that I should heed him, or heed God, and let Israel go? L'shalach et Yisrael. Lo yadati et Adonai. I do not know, Yud He Vav He. V'gam et Yisrael, lo ash," sorry, I'm just trying to see the vowels, lo ashala. Lo ashaleach, nor will I let Israel go. So the sense of not knowing God on the part of the Egyptians and the Israelites actually threads itself through the Exodus narrative. And God at some point says specifically, I have sent the plagues so that Israel may know me and the Egyptians may know me. So this knowing of God is a real goal of the entire sort of Exodus narrative. Vayamru Elohei Ivrim Nikra Aleinu Nelcha. I'm sorry. Vayamru Elohei Ivrim Nikra Aleinu Nelcha Na Derech Shoshet Yamim Bamidbar V'Nizbecha L'Adonai Eloheinu Pen Yifga'enu Badever O Bacherev. They answered, the God of the Hebrews has become manifest to us. Let us go, we pray, a distance of 3 days into the wilderness to sacrifice to our God Adonai, lest God strike us with pestilence or sword. Vayomer Aleihim Melech Mitzrayim Lama Moshe v'Aaron tafriu et ha'am mima'asav l'chu l'sivlotechem. But the king of Egypt said to them, Moses and Aaron, why do you distract the people from their tasks? Get to your labors. Vayomer Paro hen rabim ata am haaretz v'hishbatem otam misavotam. And Pharaoh continued, the people of the land are already so numerous, and you would have them cease from their labors. And we know what happened. What happened was, with this message of freedom, Pharaoh increased the amount of bricks they had to produce without giving them extra straw. And it's funny, a friend of mine who's a professor of education at CUNY and works with the unions, he has a sign on his door that says, no straw, no bricks. Okay. The next text in Exodus 5, Ume'az bati el paro l'daber b'shemecha he'ra la'am hazeh v'hatzel lo hitzalta et amecha. So Moshe is speaking to God, ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name. He's dealt worse with his people, and still you have not delivered your people. So things in terms of like freedom narratives, right, get worse before they get better. Okay, so now we're ready with that sort of preamble. We are ready for Va'era, for our parsha. And it begins very, very dramatically. Just make sure people can see online. Okay. Vayidaber Elohim el Moshe vayomer elav ani Adonai. So this is after Moshe is losing heart, right? He's disheartened. He's despairing, and God spoke to Moses and said to him, "I am ani Adonai. I am Adonai, the Eira el Abraham, el Yitzchak, el Yaakov, el Shaddai. I have appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai. Ushmi Adonai lo nodati lahem. But I did not make myself known to them by my name Adonai," which is really confusing because Yud He Vav He, as God's name, does appear in Genesis. And again and again, it says like God spoke to Abraham or Yitzchak or Yaakov using that name. So what's going on there? So we'll look at some commentary about that in a little while. V'dam hakimoti et briti itam latet lahem et eretz Canaan et eretz megurehem asher garu ba. And I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as sojourners. V'gam ani shamati et na'akat b'nei Yisrael Hashem Mitzrayim ma'avidim otam ve'ezkor et priti. I have now heard the moaning of the Israelites because the Egyptians are holding them in bondage. Lachen emor l'bnei Yisrael. And this verse 6, has become very famous because it's incorporated into the Passover Haggadah. These are the verbs with which God sort of, rescues Israel, right? I have brought them out, I have saved them, I have redeemed them, and I have taken them. So, okay, verse 6, Lachen emor l'bnei Yisrael ani Adonai ba'otzeit yechem mitachet sivlot Mitzrayim. Therefore to the Israelite people, I am Adonai, I will free you from the labors of the Egyptians. V'hitzalti etchem me'avodatam. I will free you from the labors of the Egyptians and deliver you from their bondage. V'ga'alti etchem b'zroa netunya u'b'shvatim gedolim, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and through extraordinary chastisements. V'lakachti etchem li la'am v'hayiti lachem le'elohim, and I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. V'yidatem, again, v'yidatem ki ani Adonai Elohechem, and you will know, right? And you will know, because that I am God, your Lord. Hamotzi etchem, I'm your God who freed you from the labors of the Egyptians. Hamotzi etchem mitachet sevlot Mitzrayim. And then finally, verse 8, V'heveti echem el ha'aretz asher nasati et yadi latet ota l'Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, v'natati ota lachem morasha ani Adonai. I will bring you into this land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you for a possession, I Adonai. So you see that this, these, how many, 6 verses are full of all kinds of verbs on God's part, right? I established a covenant. I have heard, the groans of Israel now. I have, I will take them. I will save them. I will redeem them. And I will finally take them to a good land. So those are, the sort of action verbs by which God is reassuring Moshe, right, in his moment of despair. Okay, let me just stop for a second and see if there are any comments. Yeah, Rob. I'm going to stop my share.
I was listening to something from Rabbi Sachs.
Yeah.
Who was talking about Parsha Vayera. And he said it's something that I never really thought about is this is the first time in the history of the world that God ever got involved directly and with something that changed history forever. And I started thinking about that.
Wait, why doesn't God get involved in Genesis? Why is this the first time
He
God gets
creates
involved?
the world, and then he's speaking to individuals.
Yeah, so this is the first time of speaking to Moshe and getting involved with the collective of Israel, with the people of Israel.
And putting himself directly involved in a course of history that changes the world. So it was like mind-boggling when I heard this.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Be nice if we had such a God right now.
He's not sleeping.
God's not sleeping. Okay, good to know. I'm glad. Yeah, Alex, did you have something? No, okay. Was there someone?
We have someone over here.
Yeah, Wendy, but come to a microphone, please.
Rob, I love it, but I disagree with you.
You disagree with me about which thing? Oh, with Rob?
Yeah.
Okay, that's better. Go ahead.
I think Noah and the flood, where God intervened, definitely changed the world. I think the Tower of Babel definitely changed the world.
So just to stop for a second, so Wendy's pointing out that from chapters 1 through 11 of Genesis, God actually connects to all of humanity. And then after that, in Genesis 12, God focuses on creating an Israelite family. Rob, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
He wasn't happy with the way things were going. He destroys the world.
I think there's involvement.
No, but there was never, he's interacting with the entire Jewish people along with the greatest nation on earth to change the course of history.
Okay, so
That's what
those
happened.
are acts of punishment, destruction, as opposed to saving, redeeming.
Well, we got redeemed at the end. We left Egypt.
I'm saying, you're saying those, the episodes that Wendy's talking about,
Yeah.
way back in Genesis, right, were acts of destruction and punishment.
Yes.
This is a different kind of action.
Yes.
Okay. Done with this debate? We're good? Okay, good. Yeah, now Alex. Oh, go ahead. Just pass the microphone. Thank you.
I'm finding this year so far
This year from
this,
January
this,
1st?
no, not from January 1st, from this Torah cycle year,
Uh-huh.
from year 57, where are we again, 57, 86? Is that right? The concept of remembering, like that, a God that forgets
Yeah,
is so, like I never really picked that up
yeah.
as much, and there's something about like, oh, God makes a covenant and then, oh yeah, I remembered. It's like, it's such an interesting thing, and I feel it's a particularly,
It never says God forgets, but
Right.
it does say God remembers.
Right.
Which implies some forgetting, right? Yes.
like what's God
Right.
doing in
Right,
the
what's
lack
going
of,
on there?
oh, like,
Yeah.
what happens that God then remembers suddenly?
Yeah.
And how do we,
Yeah.
this relationship to waiting, the relationship to patience, and so prominent in the Noah story,
Yeah.
and like so much waiting, but then that theme of remembering, obviously it's a big theme, but it's really landing for me differently today, and then in this couple.
Because, is it landing differently for you today because you feel God has forgotten us? Because, why is it landing differently?
I didn't, it's landing differently, maybe because of the conditions of the world.
Yeah.
A, and then B, my own relationship, I'm just drawn into that word.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand
Yeah.
how much, particularly in the Noah story, and then now how much waiting is happening.
Yeah.
And the implication of what's God doing?
Yeah.
There's something like, oh,
So it's interesting, where it first comes up is when the Israelites are groaning and moaning, and then God, listens to them, sees them, knows them. It's like a very intense passage, I think, at the end of Genesis 2 or 3. And then, they're in God's mind. God remembers them, and the passage kind of culminates with knowing God's people. It's really powerful. So there's something, I think, that's implied there about moaning and growing and crying and being heard, which also takes me back to like Hagar and Ishmael. What?
To MLK.
To MLK, absolutely, to MLK and to Hagar and Ishmael. Yes, for sure. Yeah. And are we heard? Are we forgotten? What's going on at this moment? That's hard. That's hard to read. Okay, Beth.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Beth.
This talk about God possibly forgetting, and it makes me wonder what in general God gets God's self up to, if anything. Did God create the world and then just sort of sit back in some sort of heavenly recliner and, have a cup of cafe au lait and watch the world unfold? To what extent?
So that's a kind of Maimonidean idea of creation. Like God puts it on automatic and it continues. As opposed to like our tefillot is like, God renews the world every single day, like a very active God.
It's interesting too, the idea that what's heard is the moans, because as any hardwired human female knows, and I guess some males too, you hear your baby cry and you're right there. You cannot not react to it. You must react to it.
It
Yeah.
does feel, I actually gave a sermon about this once. It does feel like when I had twins who were like crying in the night, I was like, the words of Exodus came back to me. Like the cry of my children and responding to them and delivering them from Egypt, delivering them from distress. It felt very resonant. Yeah, it's like a mother who remembers, like, my kid's crying again.
You
Yeah.
can't make an exodus.
What?
You can't make an exodus.
Right. Tony, well, you deliver them, so to speak. Tony, come to a microphone, and then I'm going to go on with the text.
I think it may be a mistake to think of God as outside of us and not also inside of the world and us, and even that we are, in some sense, waves on the ocean of the one love. The Rav, the first Lubavitch rabbi, speaks of there being two gods, the transcendent God and the immanent God, and And our job as holy Jews is to recognize those two gods as one God and to build a holy community based on that recognition.
Beautiful. So, using what you're saying, we can turn to the language of IFS, which is a psychotherapeutic approach of internal family system. Like bring the whole scene of Egypt and, Pharaoh and the Israelites inside as if it's like a psychic interaction, and one part of yourself is oppressing another part, or one part of yourself is actually delivering the parts of yourself that are sort of undervalued and unseen. So I think it works externally and internally. Okay, I think we're going on. Sharing my screen. There we go. Okay, so now let's look at some commentary. So the commentators and the Midrash are like really disturbed by like, what do you mean, God, that you didn't make your name known? Like, what's going on? By the, what? Yes, you did. So they have to like bend over backwards to explain like what was the difference between Yud Hey Vav Hey in Genesis and what's the difference between Yud Hey Vav Hey and the occurrence of that name here. So the El Shaddai Hivtachtim Havtachot U'Chulan Amarti Lahem Ani El Shaddai. So when I made promises to them, I said I am El Shaddai, and it's interesting that El Shaddai name often comes up in the context of promises of children, right, of fertility. Ushmi Adonai lo nadati lehem. So Rashi goes on to say, lo hodati ein ketiv kan, ela lo nodati. So it doesn't say I did not make known to them, but it says I was not, like they did not know me. Let's see what it says in the English. I did not make known to them. I was not recognized by them in my attribute of keeping faith. Lo nikarti lahem b'midat amitut sheli. So in other words, I made myself known, but they did not know me. So I was not recognized in the in my midah, in the measure of my attribute of keeping faith. She aleha nikra shemi Adonai, by reason of which my name is called Yud Hey Vav Hey, ne'eman la'amet dvarai, which denotes that I am certain to substantiate my promise. Shaharei hivtachtim v'lo kiyamti. So I made promises to them that I did not keep, because they were going to be kept in the future. Right? So remember that God appeared to Abraham saying, okay, your people will be enslaved and then I will deliver them. But in Abraham's lifetime, that promise was not kept. Only now, the fulfillment of that promise is being sort of becoming manifest. Yeah, David.
Well, the promise was kept. It wasn't, if you're talking about Genesis 15, which I think you are, it was never, he said, I will not fulfill it in your lifetime.
Those words are explicit. Well, it'll be in the future. This is what will happen.
He
to
said
your
you'll be
children.
slaves for
Yeah,
300, 400 years.
Yeah.
This is.
Yeah, but it didn't happen. It's like that promise wasn't fulfilled in Abraham's lifetime. That's the point that these commentators are making.
Well, the promise wasn't made to be fulfilled in Abraham's lifetime.
No,
That's
I agree. They're just trying to figure out, like, how does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We have another comment.
Yeah, Wendy.
The word for God, referring to God as Shaddai, is mostly seen in Genesis and infrequently seen in the rest of the 4 books of the Torah.
Correct. Also in Psalms.
And also, Shaddai is considered sometimes like the most primitive form of God's name, and hence when Rashi says, "But my name, the Lord, was not known to them," because Shaddai is a lower level of name than Elohim or Adonai.
Okay.
So if the patriarchs were in the book of Genesis and they were exposed to God through Shaddai, this is correct, that they didn't know they didn't really know his name.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so here's a very interesting midrash from Exodus Rabbah, the midrash on the book of Exodus. And it's beautiful in the sense that it names all of God's names, but says they are contextual. Each one is used at the right moment. So it says, Amar Rabbi Abba Bar Mamo. Amar Le HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe. So God said to the Holy One, blessed be he, she, they, said to Moses, Shemi ata mivakesh leda. You want to know my name? Lefi ma'asi ani nekra. Ma'asai ani nekra. According to my actions, I am called. Pe'amim sha'ani nikra be'el Shaddai, b'tzva'ot, be'elohim, ba'adonai. There are times when I'm called El Shaddai. There are times I'm called, El Tzva'ot, the Lord of Hosts, Elohei Tzva'ot, the Lord of Hosts. There are times I'm called Elohim. There are times I'm called Yud Hei Vav Hei. She'ani dan et habriot, ani nikra Elohim. So when I judge human beings, I am called Elohim. Keshani oseh milchama b'risha'im, ani nikra Tzva'ot. When I am making war upon bad people, I'm called, Elohei Tzva'ot, the Lord of Hosts, because it's God, a kind of warrior. Ukshani toleh al chata'av she'al adam, ani nekra El Shaddai. So when I sort of tolerate, I'm not exactly sure how to translate toleh, the sins of a person, I am called El Shaddai. Ukashani mirachem al olami, and when I have compassion for my world, ani nikra Yud Hei Vav Hei, I'm called Yud Hei Vav Hei. She'ein Adonai ela midat rachamim. So then they give a proof text for Yud Hei Vav Hei being the name for God when God is compassionate. Adonai el rachum v'chanun. That's what we sing on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Adonai el rachum v'chanun. Okay, and then it says, Ani nikra lefi ma'asai. I am called according to my actions. So in other words, the idea of the divine, right, is contextual.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
pretty. Rachel's excited by this idea. And it is a radical idea. And the idea of God has, of course, evolved over time. Right? It's contextual for us too. Like what ideas of God are in play for any generation says a lot about who we are, not only about who God is.
And what are the roots of Siva'ot? What's the
Sava is army.
What?
Sava is army.
Army.
Savaot
Army,
is plural for army.
Got it.
Okay, let's look at the end of the Midrash, which is also very beautiful. Rabbi Yitzchak Omer, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe. So the Holy Blessed One be He said to Moshe, Emor lahem ani shahayiti v'ani hu achshav v'ani hu la'atid lavo. So say to them that I am the God that was, I am the God that is, and I am the God that will be. L'kach kativ eheyeh shalosh pa'amim. So 3 times God uses the word eheyeh in God's conversation with Moshe in terms of telling Moshe, what God's name is. That sort of, ambiguous and I imagine sort of infuriating name that God keeps giving to Moshe, like my name is I will be. It's like, what? Okay, so here's another interpretation which I really appreciate. Eheyeh, asher eheyeh. So when God tells Moshe, I will be what I will be. Rabbi Yaakov ben Rabbi Avina b'shem Rabbi Huna the Sifarin Amar. So Yaakov, different chains of rabbis are teaching. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, and the Holy Blessed be, he said to Moshe, Emor lahem b'shibud zeh eyem imam. So say to the people that in this enslavement, this period of enslavement, I will be with them. Ub'shibud hen holchin v'heyeh imam. And into the servitude that they will go in the future, I will also be with them. Amar lefanav, v'kach omer ani lahem. And Moshe says to them, God, should I tell them now about the servitude to come? Daya l'tzara b'sha'ata. It's enough that they're enslaved now. Like this pain and agony is more than enough for this moment. Should I really tell them that this is going to happen again? And God says, Amar lo lav. God says, no. Ko tamar livnei Yisrael, eheyeh shalachani alechem. Say to the children of Israel that I will be sent. I will be has sent me to you. Lecha ani modia, lahem eini modia. I'm telling you what's going to come, but I'm not telling them. So I'm not, so there's this question here of communication. Like Moshe doesn't want to reveal to the people, like they're going to suffer again in the future, right? They're suffering now, it's enough. And God agrees, like, no, don't tell them. Just tell them that I'm going to be with them now.
Does that refer to a specific suffering to come, or just all of it?
I think, there's an awareness on the part of the rabbis that this exile is repetitive and cyclical. So every time a temple is destroyed, right? So they know something about that history by this point of the writing of this midrash, right? So it's happened several times.
It's a great club we belong to.
It's a great club. Yeah, Paul. By the way, I think for humans in general, success and failure and, homecoming, exile is cyclical. It's not just the Jews.
It's been a long cycle. It's been too many cycles.
It's been too many cycles. Too many cycles. Okay. Yeah.
My modest understanding of the civil rights movement, the strategy of it, is that what MLK and his advisors were concerned with early was appearances. They chose attractive people who were well-dressed and put themselves in a position of easily understood oppression, so that it would play really well on TV.
I'm sorry, easily understood what?
Really understood examples of oppression.
I see.
That would be sympathetic to white America.
So they had communication in mind.
Very clearly, they had a tactical approach to communication and thought about how it would work. And it worked. They got the Civil Rights Act. And then the riots happened and things fell apart for a generation. But the focus, initially at least, was on appearance. In contrast to that, the movement for civil rights for gay people had a different tactical approach. And I'm thinking now of the quilt, which was very powerful.
The AIDS quilt.
The AIDS quilt. And there, the focus was on individuals who died.
Interesting.
And their specific faces to their communities, to their families, to their next door neighbors. And that worked too. In my opinion, that was the crucial turning point in how America thought about gay people. So you have two examples, two radically different approaches to how oppression should be met. And in Exodus, we have both. I guess that's the last thing I'll say. You have both strategy and tactics, and you've got very different ways of approaching the problem. And I don't know whether the text
You're
is
both what? You're both.
we have both appearances.
Uh-huh.
So I think, at least my impression, is that while God has a variety of goals with respect to moving a nation into nationhood and out of oppression, how God or the divine interacts with its prophets and how that goal is to be accomplished it's freeform. It's kind of like a jazz. I don't know whether the divine has a clear executable path.
Well, the narrative as it comes down to us is a series of plagues
Yes,
and making Pharaoh's heart hard,
yes,
right? That seems to be the major strategy after language doesn't work, at least.
yeah, that's true. But I don't know whether how Pharaoh reacts, at least in my reading of this, is not entirely clear. And the divine has to change how each of these events is executed on the ground.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Marla.
Just a kind of historical addition.
Wait, can people hear Marla online?
Sorry, could we have a mic closer to her, please? Thank you.
Oh, just a small historical addition that in the 50s and early 60s, in the gay rights movement, there would be marches where the men were wearing suits and the women were wearing skirts, and they were also trying to play nice to America. And when Stonewall happened, the strategies changed, and it became a much more radical strategy. And then it also hooked up with the women's movement. And then kind of the almost a third way, well, it's called that, is the AIDS quilt and the humanization that brought. But this idea of trying to put a good face on it for the other was also a strategy in the gay rights movement initially.
Thank you.
Sorry, Rabbi Dan, could you just reiterate what she said? It was difficult to hear her.
You know what, Marla, I'd rather you, do you mind coming here? The microphone's not working, is that what you're saying?
Was I supposed to press a button or something?
The handheld mic isn't working, but the mic that's near you, Rabbi Diane, is working. Yeah.
Okay, Marla, would you mind, I'd rather you say it than me. Okay, okay, were there other hands? Because after this, I'm just gonna a few brief comments, because I want to get into the central text. Go ahead.
Want me to speak?
Yeah, Marla.
Oh, well, what I was saying is just a small historical addition that in the late 50s and early 60s in the gay rights movement, there would be marches where the men were in suits and the women were in skirts, and it was also this trying to play nice and appeal to the other. And then when Stonewall happened, all of that went out the window, and then it became a much more
So the nice tactics weren't working.
The nice tactics weren't working.
And then it became more radical.
Yes, it became more radical. And then when AIDS happened, another kind of radicalization happened. If you were ever to an ACT UP meeting in the 80s, they were very raucous affairs and people were very angry. Then I think the AIDS quilt was yet another stage of humanizing people who were sick and
So rather than there being just one strategy, there were multiple strategies.
Yes, that changed
depending
over
on the
time.
stage of the movement.
Yes.
Thank you, Marla. That's really helpful. Okay, David, and then Paul online. Oh, I'm sorry. David, and then Miriam online, and then Paul, and back to our text.
I want to respond to my friend Paul. What you see in Exodus and what you were describing is that God understands that people need to see things. It's an ocular thing. This whole thing is a play out. God will show. And it's very clear, and you were saying you're not sure about Pharaoh and his motivation. It's very clear God hardened his heart. He makes that very clear. Every time, it's absolutely God's play. It's what I said to you last night. It was so much easier in the days when God was interacting with us. It was very, and kind of directing the play. But yeah, that was kind of my point. It's an ocular thing and an ocular play that's being played out here for the Israelites, actually, and the Egyptians. They needed to see. And God is showing that he's the more powerful God.
So, yes, and the Israelites, there are two audiences, the Egyptians and the Israelites. And the Israelites, as we're going to see in a minute, could not hear the message of freedom, right? They could not. I just want to read two quick comments in the chat. That says MLK was reviled by whites, especially Southerners, during his life and got his national halo and hero status after death. I think that's important to remember. And Asher Chaim says, still, the way that images of state troopers confronting peaceful marchers on the Edmund Petty's Bridge played powerfully on national TV. So thank you for those. Okay, Miriam and then Paul.
My hand down, but I was going to say before, thank you. And Marla, thank you for filling in so much of that history. Yeah, I was just thinking about a lot of things with God and all these different names. And when I was young, I remember there was such conflict over religions and, the many gods or the one God. And I always thought the many are in the one and the one is, holds the many. And it didn't seem like a conflict to me. And just as you were talking about these qualities, it just like really felt like, yeah, the unified theory of God. Like there are the many, just like internal family systems, the many in us, the many gods, but we found a way of calling it the one, although there's all these different aspects. And I guess, we were in times and places where there are cultures that had many gods, but we found a way to make it one God, but also, bring in those many aspects.
E pluribus unum. Absolutely. Thank you, Miriam. The unity in the face of diversity, and our tradition is very conscious of that multiplicity, but that unity underlying that multiplicity and the multiple names, and when each of them emerge and are used. Okay, Paul, last comment, and then back to the text.
Shabbat shalom. I think it's such a rich conversation that Paul started, but everybody's been contributing to. I think just like the names of God are contextual, how we present ourselves is very contextual.
Absolutely.
And also for the civil rights movement, which is led by reverends and people in the church, they were also dressing for God. And if you look at the Brotherhood of Islam, what is it? The Nation of Islam, that was the much more radical, much more potentially violent. They also dress very carefully, and so how you dress is for different audiences. And just to say in a second, where you have in the past couple of years, you've had people, Israelis and Jews, many of them incensed that Hamas didn't have a uniform and the IDF did. So I think these are all very profound issues.
Interesting. Thank you so much. And yes, absolutely. Like, think about how we present ourselves. Like, we're purportedly one person, but we emerge and appear differently just in so many different contexts in our own lives, right? How we appear to our kid, professionally, friendship. What, Amy?
Bill's called brain sharp. I said it's not going to do it.
Okay. Let's just see what happens in our parsha here. Okay, so we did this. Okay, so after that sort of opening of God sort of saying, that sense of power, and this is what I'm going to do, we have the following verses. V'yidaber Moshe ken el bnei Israel. So Moshe told Bnei Israel all this, right? What God told Moshe. V'lo sham'u el Moshe mikotzer ruach u'me'avodah kasha. But they would not listen to Moshe. Their spirits crushed, right, by cruel bondage, right? Or literally, kotzer ruach is like narrowness of spirit, or not enough breath, and hard labor. So let's look. We'll come back to this in a minute. But let's look for a moment at Rashi on this. I know I have Rashi somewhere. Rashi seems to be missing. So I will tell you exactly what Rashi says. Rashi says, like, literally they couldn't get a breath. Like, they're going, it's like it's such hard labor that they just could not breathe. Okay. So verse 10, V'yidaber Adonai el Moshe le'emor, and God spoke to Moshe saying, Bo daber el Paro melech Mitzrayim v'shalach et bnei Israel me'artzo. Go and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites depart from his land. V'yidaber Moshe l'fnei Adonai le'emor, hein bnei Israel lo sham'u elai, ve'ech yishma'eni Paro ba'ani arel sfatayim. But Moses appealed to Adonai saying, but the Israelites would not listen to me. How then should Pharaoh heed me who's of uncircumcised lips? Right, so again, we have a prophet who can't speak, a Pharaoh who can't, hear, and a people also who are not listening. Okay, so now Aviva Zornberg, the dynamic of language of communication has failed. In the Zohar, this failure is the profound meaning of exile. It encompasses the inability to hear and the inability to speak. Moses' speech problems in this context is to be understood as a function of a deeper cultural rupture. So that feels very right to me for this moment. The ears of this generation cannot respond to living language. For this reason, Moses cannot speak. So that's interesting. Can Moses not speak because he doesn't have listeners? Or can he not speak because he can't speak? Yeah. Okay. Melissa Carpenter, a rabbi, writes, in Kabbalistic terms, the children of Israel are stunted in the ruach level of soul. Like animals, they exist from day to day with only the nefesh, the level of soul that animates the body. They have neither time nor energy to access the ruach and neshama level of soul. The neshama is a soul level where one can hear one's calling and receive inspiration, and the ruach level is where one is seized by the drive and motivation to seek that calling to do something new. So in other words, they're just living on the level of survival, right? And we all know it, right? Sometimes, like when you're in a rush, when you're anxious about something, you can't hear or pay attention to sort of larger things. It's like, oh my God, I've got to make it to that meeting, otherwise I'm in trouble. Or, oh my God, I've got this deadline, right? And it's like we're just in survival mode. Okay, so again, Aviva Zornberg says, Pharaoh, the hard-hearted, cannot consider even the idea of change, so he refuses to hear our Moses. Pharaoh afflicts his Israelite slaves with the same deafness by making their lives so hard that they cannot stop and listen to any revolutionary ideas. Thus, Egypt, which in Hebrew is called Mitzrayim, the narrow place, is the place of constriction for both master and slave. It is a place where people are stunted, cut short, kotzer, right? Narrow or cut off from the freedom of thought that makes us human. Okay, did you raise your hand or you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on one second. So this is really interesting. So what happens in the text here is that we have Moshe's statement of Arel Sfatayim, of uncircumcised lips, and it's a statement of despair, and how can he go on? And suddenly, inserted in the text is this long bibliography. And then finally at the end, it's like, at the end of the genealogy, at the end of that genealogy, we have these verses in verse 26. Hu Aharon Moshe Asher Amar Adonai Lahem Motziu et Bnei Yisrael Mitzrayim al Sivotam. So it's the same Aaron and Moses to whom Adonai said, bring forth the Israelites from the land of Egypt troop by troop. It's almost as if the text has taken a huge step back, right, to say like, oh, Moses is part of this line and part of this destiny. This can't end here. It can't end with Moses' sense of despair and inability to speak. No, it's got to go on, right? Haim hamidabrim el paro melech Mitzrayim lahotzi b'nei Yisrael Mitzrayim hu Moshe v'Aaron. It was they who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to free the Israelites from the Egyptians. These are the same Moses and Aaron. Or even as if the Torah is reassuring us, the readers, like, no, it's not just some schmuck who's giving up, right? Excuse my French. No, this is that Moshe and Aaron, right? They've got this destiny. They've got this project.
Yeah, but daber, but then it really happens because of the performative acts of God. It's these plagues that are visible. It's not the words of Moshe or Aaron that really...
It doesn't rest on Moshe's language, for sure, it doesn't.
Or Aaron's. I mean,
It doesn't. But when it seems like the enterprise is going to come to an end, there's a reminder here that the story is going to go forward. But you're right, it's not resting on their language.
And it uses the word daber, several times in these few psukim.
You're right. You're right.
Emphasizing that you have to speak to Paro.
Yeah,
It has nothing to do with them speaking to Paro.
absolutely.
Sure? Are you sure?
So says the
Well,
text.
on the pshat level, on the just the level of the narrative, it does not look like it has anything to do with their speaking, because again and again, Pharaoh, sometimes of his own devices and sometimes of God's devices, turns away, and his heart hardens, and then there's a plague.
It's not a convincing speech, though.
It is a process. Let me just finish this, and I see there's a lot of hands, so hold on a second. Let me just finish this passage.
It's good to have a big stick.
Vayhi b'yom diber Adonai el Moshe b'Mitzrayim, for when Adonai spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt.
That's always helpful.
V'yidaber Adonai el Moshe le'emor, Ani Adonai daber el Paro melech Mitzrayim, and kol asher ani dover elecha. And Adonai said to Moses, I am Adonai, speak to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all that I will tell you. But you're right, there's this immediate emphasis on speaking and on language, which will only really become free and effective later on, right? After they leave
They
Egypt.
can't hear.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? And, back to Paul's point, how do you appeal to a people who can't hear? And a Pharaoh who also can't hear. So Moses appealed to God saying, see, I get tongue-tied. Vayomer Moshe lefnei Adonai, Hein ani arel sfatayim, I am of uncircumcised lips. Ve'ech ishma Eli Paro, and how's Pharaoh going to listen to me? And it's a real issue. And then we get into this whole description of snakes and what happens on a subterranean level, because again, language is not working. Okay, I'm going to
I jumped Ben.
That's okay. Ben, and then I see Marilyn online, and I think I saw Oswaldo. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I'll make it quicker, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I
just
agree,
wanted to add.
At the end of the day, the plagues, all of that. But we know many cultures where, people pray for rain or whatever, things don't happen just because you pray. You need a communicator, you needed Moses to say X, Y, and Z, and, obviously Pharaoh felt that he was more powerful, whatever, but you needed that communication to be able to say, okay, this is how we're going to channel what Moses is asking. We're going to let the people go. All right, these plagues are happening. But without the communication from Moses, I don't think that...
True. Well, that's interesting. So what Oswaldo is saying is, without the communication for Moses, they'd have no frame for the plagues.
Right.
What are the plagues about? Are they
Right.
just a series of disasters?
Right.
So it gives a context to what Pharaoh's refusing. Okay, Ben.
Yeah, I agree with that. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And there's a lot going on here. I think one thing that I wanted to add to the conversation is I'm not sure I agree that it would be that things were easier when God was directly involved in human affairs. I think it was way more terrifying. And I think what the Torah is telling us is that whenever the people even get a glimpse, the closer the people get to God being involved, when God is actually involved in places, it's they can't handle it.
Yeah, remember at Sinai, they hear God's voice,
Exactly.
They hear what we call the Ten Commandments, and they say, Moshe, let God not speak to us anymore, lest we die. We're going to die.
Right.
We cannot take this intensity. Absolutely.
Right. And so I think the
And that's why you need a strategy of communication.
That's right.
That
That's
communication
right.
is not
That's
working.
exactly why.
And there was a strategy, right? God stopped speaking to them directly.
Exactly, and that's why I think God is saying to Moshe, "Don't tell them." Right? There's this dance
That's right.
of
That's
trying to get. I think just in general, it goes to this larger fragmentation, and like humans can only ever get like the tiniest wisp of God. And even that, sometimes they're not capable of that either, right? They're very lucky if once in their lifetime,
we.
yes, we,
human
right?
beings,
It was
right.
then, it was now,
Yeah.
right? But like humans in general,
What can we tolerate of the larger reality?
right? And so I think
And the nature of the divine.
yeah, and so I want to juxtapose that with this notion of the enslaved Israelites being stunted in the ruach level of the soul, because I think, and this idea of the yud hey vav hey, the hey and the vav being separated, and this idea of like, and the multiple names of God, because I think the names of God, again, it's like a similar idea where it's like this is a wisp of God that's manifesting. Even when we humans manifested in an entire name, it's like, oh, this is the God of judgment, this is the God of this is the God of that. It's like, no, that's just like the tiniest little wisp of something that is completely incomprehensible to us. And it's really the manifestations of power is really about
I think at some level that's also true in the human-to-human encounter. Like we only see little slices little
of each
slivers
other.
of each other.
Right.
And then we come to these judgments about the whole.
About the
but
whole,
we're
right.
not looking at the whole.
Right, nobody can look at the whole.
Right. It's like, oh, they're so narcissistic. I'm like, really? But there are these other parts of them.
Right, because we have to comprehend that, even just to comprehend that there are multiple, like what we're talking about now, even that is just a small sliver.
Even that is just a small sliver.
Right.
Beautiful.
So,
Okay,
and then,
finish up then. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
That's
so
fine.
I just want to combine that with the this notion also that the way that the Israelites are cut off in their enslaved state. I'm just going to remind people that is going to continue to be the case after this miracle happens, right? After God manifests, God's direct involvement.
Absolutely. They still can't hear.
Right, they still can't hear, right?
It's not from avodah kasha anymore. It's not from hard labor anymore.
Right.
It's from stunted spirits.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Right.
And so
it's like a permanent PTSD state of being.
Right.
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 We're working on it. Thank you. Okay, I see Marilyn online and then Tomas in the room, and then I'm going to do 2 more texts before we conclude.
Great to follow after that because I've sort of been obsessed with the names of God and what is that context. So I was sort of trying to look at all of Genesis and whoops, am I? Yeah.
You're good. We hear you.
Yeah, I'm
You
okay.
just looked at all of Genesis in the past few minutes. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Speaking of time travel, and sort of analyzing that Abraham, Isaac, like the God of Shaddai, well, all of these people had a lot of agency, actually, and the story of all of them is really like Lech Lecha, go, and each of them actually left their family and separated and created something. There's a lot of agency in all of them. And ironically, even Moses leaves also. So there's this, it's a different kind of God because the Yud Hey Vav Hey, like which connects to the I will be what I will be, like we've been talking about, is the God of change. God can change and man can change. Man has that power of change, of transformation, as you were talking about. And these slaves that are short of breath and short of spirit cannot envision that possibility. And if you can't envision that possibility, you can't move. But God is saying, this is going to be the process. I'm going to teach them that it is possible to change, that change is possible.
Beautiful, beautiful, Marilyn. And I think that's why Moshe, or the leader, has to hold a longer view. Like this, whatever this is, it's a moment in the cycle. And we've been here before. And I don't know about all of you, but it's kind of comforting to me, as horrible as things are. It's like, oh, we are not immune from history. Like it happened before, or something like this has happened before, not exactly. And we're here again, and here we are. And what can we learn from our ancestors about how to cope with this moment? Right? We're just, we thought, American Jews, right? We were, these kinds of things that we're seeing in Minneapolis would never happen here. And then suddenly so many of us are like, stop, what are these images? Like, what are these images? Wow. And I don't mean to conflate the two moments of history, but again, it's so important to remember that other human beings have been here before. Okay, with that, Tomas.
Thanks.
Yeah, this might work now because I think I turned it on. Did I turn it on? Let's see.
Okay.
Did I turn it on?
Pass this over.
It's green.
Oh.
Here,
Try to.
pass
Thank you.
this.
No, just to swim a little against the undertow of our discourse.
Against the undertow of the room.
Well, the undertow is that there was this time when God was here, and now God isn't. The direct involvement in history and human affairs, and we have somehow been abandoned, and goes to this larger theological dilemma of theodicy, of how is there injustice in the world and a seemingly absent God who lets all this shit happen. And because of our free will, right? Like that's why, because we are in the image of that creator, and we are left to our own devices with our free will. But at the risk of being too ecstatic or mystic about it, I think that can really be reframed. And you can just say, God is as directly involved in human affairs at this very moment as God was at the parting of the Red Sea. Like nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Yeah, God is as directly involved. And all that remains to us is to cultivate the capacity to recognize that involvement. You do not pray for the miracle, you pray for the ability to recognize and therefore receive the miracle. The miracle is continuous, unbroken.
So I think that's the other undertow in the room, actually.
Yeah.
I don't think you're moving against the current. I think the other undertow in the room is like, wow, we can only see parts of things.
Well,
how can we sort of open up our eyes to see
that goes to this other very troubling word, this stuntedness, which I think is kind of insulting to those slaves. I would rather say that they were injured.
Absolutely.
Stunted in the sense of malnourished.
Injured and wounded and,
Yeah.
And that kind of exploitation sort of limits our, it makes the aperture smaller.
Just so. And to palliate that insult, I think we can invite that word to apply to ourselves. We too are stunted. We too our liberation is to this day incomplete.
We too are wounded.
We
too have limited vision.
We are still, to some extent, enslaved. We are still insufficiently liberated in all of the movements of national, personal, collective liberation. And therefore, we too, like Moses, are deficient in speech, deficient in hearing, deficient in vision, and
I think there's something about that knowledge and acknowledgement itself that's redemptive, because it means that there's something about the collective that's freeing. Like you and I, as a friend of mine said, by myself, not so smart. Together, we're a genius, right? And this friend is a genius.
This room is a very good example of that.
Yeah, actually, it's like the beautiful revelation